Chevron 1, coded.
For my ally is the Force, and the powerful ally it is. Life creates it, makes it grow.
You failed, Your Highness. I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
Cry hammer, and let's set the dogs of war.
Chevron 2 is coded.
Conan, what is best in life? Crush your enemies, see them driven before you, to hear the lamentation of your women.
It's all in the reflexes.
Paul also said you're heavy into martial arts, Tai Chi and all that killer stuff. I suppose we have to register you as a lethal weapon.
Chevron 3 encoded.
And somebody ought to belt you in the mouth. But I won't. I won't. The hell I will.
Chevron 4 encoded.
Do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
Chevron 5 encoded.
You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Chevron 6 encoded.
Not for why you can, monk boy.
Great Scott.
Back off, man. I'm a scientist.
You shall not pass! I thought I'd die fighting side by side with Alpha.
What about side by side with a friend?
A day may come when the courage of men fails, when we forsake our friends and break all bonds of fellowship. But it is not this day.
Chevron 7 is locked.
Howdy, one and all. Welcome back to Saturday Night Drive-In, where we take a moment from the hectic, psychotic clown world we live in and try to just have a good time talking about a movie or two. You never know. One day we may do a double feature. But we're here to have a good time tonight, and I am joined, as always, by my life partner, I guess that's the term we use, Jed, the Hollywood scholar. Jed, are you done being a pool shark for the night?
I'm done being a pool shark. Yes, it's great to be here, but because of constraints of time, I'm actually in a very unusual position right now. And I just want to show you guys where I am. It might make Adam jealous that I'm in a different man's bedroom than his. But I am in Beardo's room here at the G&G Content House, rocking his setup, and it's great to be here talking about a movie that I love. I'm definitely more critical on it this time than I have been previously, but I do love this movie, so I'm excited. I'm pumped to talk about it.
And at least you qualify to be in his studio. You have a beard, so
it's true.
That's you can't pass through the security system without a beard. So
that's true. I've met the minimum requirements to run this setup.
I can't get in there. Even when the scruff gets to a week and a half, I wouldn't be able to get through. The security traps would descend upon me, and I wouldn't make it. But yeah, so we are here to talk Truman Show. Before we do that, though, hail and howdy to the chat. Thank you for joining us at this later time than we normally start on Saturday because, one, as we said, Jed was playing pool with the G&G team, and I was off getting a haircut, so I can look pretty for you guys. So we are now
kinky.
It's good. That's so good. little high and tight. I feel good again. I know for you, it's like, what are you talking about? Your hair was short before, but for me, I like it shorter, and it takes time. And then I got to have a real dinner. Nice big hamburger, potatoes, pickles. Oh, it was good. It was good. Anyway, hail and howdy the chat. Hail the Goddess Legionist and Tranquil Waters, Mustang Ride, my mods, my irregulars. Hail to you, Algrim the Strong. Good sir, always happy to see you here. Hail Kaladair, who has not seen this movie. We don't know how you'll feel about it. We're going to probably definitely have a good discussion about it. And if you're just not chatting and watching, we're happy to have you here. And if you're watching on the replay, remember to hit that like button. Whether you like the movie or not, we hope we entertain you for the rest of this likely hour or so. So, Jed, let's just jump right in. This was your choice this week. Set us up. Jim Carrey in The Truman Show. What is it?
Perfect. So yeah, the reason I love this movie is it's an escape from a reality story. That's the biggest thing, is defining what your reality is. Very much on the same lines as The Matrix. And there was a period of my life where I love movies like this. So the plot of The Truman Show follows this character whose name is Truman. He was born into a TV show. He was just, from the moment of his birth, he was a character on a TV show, and he never knew it. So it follows his entire life. He's grown
30
up.
years.
30 years. It's been 30 years. He's been a character on a television show that he has no awareness of, and everything around him, everybody around him is completely fake and fabricated, completely controlled, trying to craft this authentic story. And that's what they're going for, because a lot of people have struggled with authenticity. And so it's just about him realizing that his world is fake and trying to escape from it. And I really love stories like that. That's why this story appeals so much to me. And there's also the aspect of the meta. There's so much meta in it that mostly makes fun of Hollywood. So any movie that makes fun of Hollywood, I'm there for. I enjoy a little bit of self-deprecating humor, especially from them. And Jim Carrey, I think he is capable of great dramatic roles, but like Dane mentioned on a previous stream, I think it was Mellow Mondays, that this was a weird one for Jim Carrey, because he was 100% going Oscar bait. This movie definitely didn't deserve an Oscar. I can freely admit that, even though I do love this movie. But yeah, it's just a neat little idea. It's not within the realm of reality. There's no way this could happen, but it's just neat.
I think what I like best when I rewatched this the other night, it kept me up very late because it was the last thing I did, and I just decided to would power through it, get it done. First of all, I forgot nothing. It was the same movie I remembered. It's been about easily a decade since I last watched this movie, maybe a little more. Same exact movie I remembered, same exact points. But I think what I do like about it is I like the messaging, or at least what I feel as the theme messaging of it, where it's giving you, I feel like it's talking about authoritarianism in a little bit of a way versus freedom, individuality.
There's definitely that aspect of it. I would 100% agree. Like Christoph, I believe is his name, Ed Harris's character. Yeah, just the way that he controls this world. There's definitely an authoritarian vibe to it. I can definitely see where you're coming from.
I felt that that is what I was able to latch onto in this watch through that I did, and I was thinking about it the whole time. So let's get right into it. So we're 30 years in to Truman Burbank's life. And it's funny, they call him Burbank because it's Hollywood Burbank. I nice little joke, but and it's the world is Truman's world, entire world exists on this fake island, so that they can keep him pretend isolated, where they've even manufactured a fear of water, what we call aquaphobia,
something like that,
where he's afraid to cross any bridge. He won't go back on a ship, so that he will remain locked in place in this island. And it's a weird mix, because when was this made?
96?
96? Can you look that up? Hang on.
Yeah.
But you go. You say something. Well, I get this. Hang on.
Okay. But yeah, no, it's an interesting concept, because if Truman hadn't been Truman, if it was somebody else, this might have worked for his entire life and achieved like the first on-screen conception, like Christoph says he wants so much, and done the entire life until his eventual death. But it was a mere coincidence that Truman was chosen. Later on, they say he was 2 weeks premature in his birth. That's why he was chosen, and he was born with this.
Five candidates,
and he was born with this adventure spirit. So if he hadn't been premature and it was another kid who didn't have that ingrained adventurous spirit within him, maybe this would have worked forever.
Okay, so it was 98. Came out in 98.
Okay.
So 98. So this movie is over 20 years old.
Yep.
And so the weirdest thing, so it takes place in 98, but the world, the island that Truman lives on, is a weird mix of 1998 and 1950s. And it's a very interesting visual concept, where the technology is all there, but the style of everything, like the way everybody looks, the way everybody talks, the way the industries happen, like vending machines, small shops, the college,
the way hospital. That his wife dresses as a nurse, that's very 1950s.
Yeah, it's a very interesting concept, and it fits into Christoph's whole concept of this world is a perfect world where you have the technology of modern day, but the quaintness of 1950s and the I would say proper conservatism of 1950s. And I don't mean politically, I mean socially, where
Yeah.
people behaved like good human beings. They weren't complete dicks to each other. So Truman is immersed in this world where everybody's nice and nobody's an asshole.
That's a period that a lot of people look back on as very idealistic. I mean, it was the 50s, I believe, where the popularization, at least, or the advent of the term nuclear family came about. And that's something that people have strived for decades after the 50s. But it's quintessentially 1950s for the nuclear family. And so there's a comforting aspect to it. And hopefully, at least I believe they did that to lull Truman into comfortability.
I agree with you. It was that nice quaintness that, excuse me, that once he reached maturity, because from, I would say, toddler to 15, it's pretty easy to contain a child in a world like that because the parents are still in control, even though they killed off his father to generate the, when I say killed off, they, like, soap opera killed him off because it's all TV. Nobody actually died. They removed him from the show to generate his aquaphobia. And again, we're sorry for using the wrong term for that, but that's the best I can come up with. I know one phobia, arachnophobia, agoraphobia too. I know the agoraphobia. But anyway, so it's that. But when he gets to high school and college and they start trying to influence his adulthood behavior, that's when I think when they have the flashback to Sylvia, when he meets Sylvia, where natural attraction takes over, where he sees somebody and she sees him, and there's an instant connection. Human instinct. You can't fight that. And they try to with Meryl, his wife. Go ahead. I was trying to find my words. Go ahead.
Mentioning Meryl and that flashback sequence, that's one of my favorite aspects of the movie because of the meta aspect of it. There's a lot of TV shows that we've seen where it feels like there are forced relationships that are just driven down your throats as much as the characters themselves. And that's exactly what the Meryl relationship with Truman is. From her like stumbling on him, trying to create this, oh, you saved me, and trying to create this romantic moment. Their entire relationship is like that. And we've seen that on so many TV shows. And the audience always knows in the back of their mind, this feels fake, and it's just a very common trope. So I love that they were making fun of that.
I mean, you say that, people know it. When you get a look at the real world audience throughout the movie that's watching Truman, they hate Meryl. They seem
absolutely.
to they don't like her at all. At one point, after Truman starts to, the movie starts right away Truman starts his day, and a light fixture drops from this giant dome, which is the giant studio, the third largest man-made structure that can be seen from space. And that's the trigger where Truman is now wondering about stuff. That's kind of the catalyst for the moment. And then everything else when his fake father sneaks on and it descends into chaos. But from that moment on, he's questioning everything, and the audience is watching it. And when it leads to a point where he's really trying to burst the bubble, the actress who plays Meryl is starting to lose it because she doesn't want to be there anymore. And at one point, one of the waitresses that we continually go back to in the Circle of View says, "Oh, she's not going to leave the show yet. He has to have it out with her. He's not going to leave. He has to have it out with Meryl." So that shows you, like you said, the audience knows that it's false and they don't like her. But at one point, one chick who hadn't watched it says, "Who's that?" "Oh, he'll never forget." They can take the Sylvia out of the show, but he'll never forget her. So it shows you that you make a great point, the meta of it all, where a real audience will automatically be attracted to a true chemistry moment as opposed to a fake one that is Meryl. And that was great. But the whole Sylvia thing, that's the best points in the movie for me is the Sylvia related stuff.
I can agree with that.
The flashback is great because it's the real moment, because everything Truman does is real. That's the concept of the show. But then she's also real, and that's why it's a cool moment. And then her I don't think pining is the right word. Her crusade to save him catches me, because I love it at the end. And we're gonna spoilers, of course. We can jump around when Truman faces his crucible moment of the choice. And she's the one that said to Kristoff when she has the phone call with him, don't underestimate Truman. He's going to prove you all wrong. He's not to be controlled. He doesn't want to live in your gilded cage.
Mm-hmm.
And she's watching, and when Truman chooses to leave, she grabs her coat and she goes. And I love that moment. I just something about that moment that it hits that hopeless romantic little soft spot in me, and I love it.
Well, it helps. We know he's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just a cliffhanger of, oh, he might starve to death on the street 5 minutes later.
No.
Like, she's gonna help him. He's gonna be all right.
He probably also has a good lawsuit ready to go.
Oh God, yes. How is that legal?
It can't be.
No, it's like slavery on next level. Like, there's a lot of interesting stuff with it, but I don't think this could ever happen. And even like it says it's in the 90s, but technology-wise, they're a good few decades in the future, just with the dome of nothing else.
That dome, yeah.
Yeah, especially because it's lights. Like, if it was just some set town that was fake and they were controlling, that they do that all the time
sun.
now.
The
fake sun is where things become a little bit sci-fi, but
it's kind of, I guess, it's kind of like the volume that we have now, isn't it?
yeah, I mean, evolution of it to a certain extent. Yeah. Well, I do want to backtrack a little bit to one of my biggest issues with the movie. Like, I do love this movie, but it's got a lot of flaws. Like, I think a lot of people, as much as I'm hyping it up, will be surprised at my final score. But my biggest issue with the movie is the series of inciting incidences. There's just too many that happen too quickly, from the light to his father coming back to the radio glitching out in his car. That's a lot to go wrong in a close period of time. And I think this could have been changed with an easy, just throwaway line.
Let me see if I can guess it, though. It could have been if somebody was sabotaging it.
That could do it as well. That's not the one I was specifically thinking of. Like, if Sylvia was doing it, that could absolutely work. But perhaps people are getting tired of the show after 30 years, thinking it's not getting anything new. And so viewership is declining and the money's drying up. So they can't afford to keep up the equipment. They can't keep up security enough, and it's just all falling apart because people don't think it's fresh. And that could be an internal struggle with Kristoff, because he believes he's a mastermind. So he's like, these people are understanding.
He's got a god complex.
He 100% does. And then if the viewing audience was just leaving him in droves, that would piss him off. He'd be like, I'm making television gold. Why don't they understand what I'm doing here? So there's more conflict with him. There's an explanation for all the series of coincidental inciting incidences. And I think just a little bit of that with the Kristoff storyline would have helped to justify the story to a further degree and make it way more solid.
Yeah, I mean, my criticisms begin with the fact that outside of Jim Carrey and Ed Harris, everybody else's performances are pretty stale. And
it's hard to tell if that's intentional or not.
Yeah,
that's the hardest part, because they might be pretending to be soap opera actors.
I know you're right, but it's just I don't care about anybody else. I care about Truman. The movie does a good job making me care about Truman, and it's a very interesting point. You talk about the possibility of people getting bored. When Truman tries to break free of it all, the audience is riveted, and they want him to be free. That's the funny thing. These people who are watching this endless show, the tagline for that is "How will it end?" That's the tagline for the whole show. How will it end? When they're watching it, they're glued. They are rapt with attention, and you would think these people who this is their drug, this is their TV thing that they've been watching for 30 years. You would think that they would want it to go on forever, but when they see him ready to escape, they're cheering him on. I mean, the dude in the bathtub, when Truman's in getting tossed around at sea, and he's holding on to the rope, the guy in the bathtub's holding on to a towel, going, "Hold on!" Bro, he's trying to grab on that too. It's a fascinating. Again, you bring up the meta aspect of this is a correct way to apply the interesting points of this. These people should want it to go on forever, but they care about the reality of this person who is completely real, because he's the only not fake thing. The opening line said in one of the very first lines of the movie, where you see his best friend, the guy playing his best friend, says, "Everything's real. It's all real." When in fact, none of it is real. Just Truman is real. Sorry, my microphone there. Truman's the only real thing.
Well, the thing you mentioned there is one of my favorite conversations with this movie, because what you mentioned there, the reality of the TV show, the reality of Truman being a real person, is impactful to them. It's not scripted like reality TV is in our world, but it's an interesting thing to think about. As much as Christoph is fighting against Truman escaping, it is the culmination of his life's work and proves him right. It proves Christoph right, the fact that Truman escapes. And just when we see the audience shots, the audience is way more invested in this television moment than any other historical television moment, because it's real. So as much as Christoph is like, no, we can't let this happen, it's exactly what proves his experiment valid.
I want to talk about Christoph for a second here, then, talking about proving him right. In a weird way, I think he does love Truman.
Oh, 100%.
Because there's that moment when he comes in the middle of the night, and it's the sleeping Truman cam, and he caresses the screen.
It's weird, but it does effectively
It conveys the emotion. As megalomaniac as he is, as much of a tyrant as he is, he does care about you, because to him, Truman will be safest in the Gilded Cage.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to be safest there. And he doesn't want him to go out into that harsh, horrible world. He wants him to be there where he can have a peaceful life forever.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was clear that he was never, that he never thought that Truman was going to break free of the hypnosis of it all, though. I don't think he ever really prepared for that.
And to be fair, that's something that should have been accounted for.
Yeah.
Human nature has been prescribed in every television show, every movie, good ones could tell. Every good movie, every good television show, every good book in human history that just need to, for the truth. And as such a creative man as he is, as an artist he should understand that and at least try to account for it. So I think that's his ego to a certain extent, is believing that he's good enough that he doesn't need to account for the basics of human spirits. So there's just so much with Christoph. I find him as the fascinating character in the show. Easily the most fascinating.
Ed Harris gives a great performance. Mm-hmm. Very unlike other Ed Harris roles one might be familiar with, where he's usually the gruff guy, the serious guy. No, here he's the inflated ego artist.
Mm-hmm.
That is truly, I mean, the meta. He has the artist hat on. He has all the trimmings of I am the artiste. He speaks in that subtle tone where he knows he's right and you're wrong. When that conversation with Sylvia, he's so arrogant.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not a surprise that he's that arrogant. And it works. And Sylvia is so, in a little way, self-righteous about her belief that she's so flustered by his calm demeanor.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a great exchange. That's why those three characters are the ones that best me. Like I said, everybody else kind of, whether it's the intent of it, and just kind of scratch my head. Especially, I thought this for the first time. I don't know if for the first time. Yeah, I think it's for the first time I thought of this when I was watching this. Meryl has to be a whore.
Yes, because he wanted to have the first on-screen conception, which means she agreed to that when they were in high school. Remember, because they got together in their senior year of high school. So they went to the 17-year-old girl and was like, in a few years, you're going to marry this man and you're going to have a baby with him. You all right with that? And she said yes.
She's been sleeping with him.
Oh, 100%.
They've been having sex.
They even talk about it. Like, they fade out the music, the lights, the wind. They describe how these sex scenes happen.
Yes.
And I think it's interesting. It would have been kind of funny if they had, like, oh, we gave Truman bad sex ed, so he thinks kissing is sex or something like that. Just an in-joke like that. It's like, well, are they actually having sex? And then Christoph's just like, oh, no, his sex ed class was shit.
But it is left to understand that real sex is happening because you make the point. Christoph says, oh, I'm still intent on having the first on-air conception ever. So that means snoo is happening.
Which it can't happen, though, because he cuts away during the sex, so it's not going to be an on-air conception.
Well, she would be pregnant, and we know she would be pregnant.
Well, it would still be a real pregnancy, but it wouldn't be an on-screen conception unless it suddenly went from very PG
unless
to
they went
X.
for it. Unless they went, or at least there's just a screen, you see things happening, and you hear the go, oh, when it finishes.
They gotta pull a whatchamacallit, Austin Powers, just backlight it through a screen, and you just see their shadows going at it.
So, but I mean, that struck me that like, wow, she's a whore because she's sleeping with this guy for a job. She's not doing. It's not even remotely this.
Yeah, no, and it's the same thing with that other woman they brought in at near the last quarter of the movie.
The replacement.
Yeah, the
new
replacement with the red dress, and
Yeah.
it was a lot sooner for her. Like Christoph was like, "Hey, come in, take this role, and then you're gonna have sex with this man within a few months and make a baby." And she's just like, "Let's go, let's roll."
Well, here's the thing. I think in that world, in the world of Truman, people, whether you're that's the place to have a job. That is the pinnacle of acting, to be on the Truman Show. So if you have to sacrifice your sexual morals to be on the Truman Show, you would be the woman that had Truman's baby.
And it sets up the sequel, and then she has a lifetime gig as the mother of Truman Point 2.
The real mother, not just fake soap opera mom.
Oh, I hate his mom. It's intentional. Like, it's exactly what you wanted.
It's the classic overbearing mom. Yeah,
Yeah, and it's
so
like,
trope.
I don't blame you for killing your father, but in a tone that says, I 100% blame you. Like, it's very well done. Like, they want me to hate her guts, so it's very well written, but I do hate her.
Yeah, it's you're supposed to. You're supposed to. I think you're right in the sense you're not supposed to really be attached to any of the other characters. But to me, that over the top of making it soap opera-ish, making them still feel so fake, it diminishes the movie just a little bit because the product placement or the.
Oh, I think that's hilarious. That's some of the meta for me.
But it's the meta. But it diminishes the. I think the movie would have been a little more powerful if they hadn't leaned so far into that part of the meta. If they had tried to make it feel a little more real. Because even Truman at one point says, "Why do you talk to me like that? Why are you always doing that?" It shows that
love that
even
scene.
he wasn't believing
What you
it.
talking
I mean, let's talk about Jim Carrey then. We can't not talk about Jim Carrey because
Yeah, it would just be as crazy as watching or talking about Empire Strikes Back and not talking about Luke. That would be just as crazy.
Yeah, we would never do that.
Never.
Never at all. Never. Hey, we made up for it with Jedi. We talked that entire one about Luke. But as a performance, it is pure Jim Carrey. It's pure Jim Carrey. But like you alluded to earlier with our conversation we have with our good buddy Dane on Monday when we mentioned we were doing this, it's Jim Carrey walking the fine line between I'm zany Jim Carrey and I'm serious Jim Carrey. But there's only 2 moments, I think, in the movie where he truly gave, and it's usually within maybe one line, a true serious dramatic moment. I want to see if we line up on that one, if you agree on this. One of them, in my opinion, the best one, is the final moments where Christoph is talking to him, trying to convince him, and without looking back, it just says, "You never had a camera in my head." And the way he delivers that line, that is the realest that Jim Carrey and the realest that even Truman is in the entire movie. And that's perhaps my favorite Truman line in the movie. "You never had a camera in my head." And he nails the dramatic point of that, but that's not enough to be super drama Jim Carrey. That they were, like you said, trying to Oscar bait this, because the rest of the show, he's doing goofy shit the whole time, all the time, and even classic Jim Carrey stuff. Oh, that kind of shit. That is vintage Jim Carrey from A Living Color. That's vintage Jim Carrey. So, how do you feel about that in terms of the fine line between the goof and the drama?
It's a very difficult line to ride, and I think he does a great job at it for the most part because he is going insane. Like, Truman is legitimately insane, but like throughout the course of the movie, like there's a lot going on with him. He doesn't know how to act in reality. His whole world is falling apart. So I think the goof contextually makes sense, and then the other goof that predates his awakening per se is a more social thing because he's grown up in this environment where no one tells him no, and no one tries to correct his behavior, so he's socially awkward. Truman is incredibly socially awkward, and I think that's where a lot of the Jim Carrey stuff shines. Like, no normal person goes, if I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. That's because he's not socially developed in a traditional manner or an effective, mature manner. And so I think the Jim Carrey stuff works, and just like with the other characters, it makes sense.
You bring up a fantastic point there that was in the back of my mind. The whole point that he doesn't know proper social cues because he's grown up in this weird thing. He hasn't been socialized properly yet. Somehow, and again, I'm going to go back to the flashback with this. When he gets his moment with Sylvia when they're in the library, that's a straight up baller move when he hits on her. And it's, even though he's had all the socially wrong cues, and to your point, no one has had everything crafted for him, where he's never had any sort of detracting moment, except for the manufactured stuff to keep him afraid of water and stuff like that. His confidence level is through the roof.
Well, that makes sense.
I mean, it's just he is not afraid of that kind of thing, and I think that leans back to the earlier conversation of he has that human instinct that he is ready to be like you said, his innate adventurous nature, and also the fact that I see a pretty girl and she's smiling at me, and I want to do things with her, and those natural instincts of a red-blooded man is going to take over because the urge is there. You're gonna follow through if you're getting if the signals are being reciprocated. If she's waving you in, then you're gonna go for it. And he went for it. And that's one of the things I like about the flashback, where that's the realest Truman moment. Aside from that's the other dramatic moment right there. It's not drama, but it's a serious moment where he's connecting with someone who's actually being real with him. So that was the second moment that was, for me, the best moment of. I guess maybe it's not drama, but it's serious and it's organic, and that's why it works, and that's why the audience remembers and loves that moment. The audience within the show, the movie. But excuse me. Overall, Jim Carrey, he does a good job. He does a good job. And back then, when I was an actual Jim Carrey fan, all those many years ago, today not so much. But back then, because I watched the hell out of Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. I own that one. I watched that tape so many times. I liked it because I grew up watching him on In Living Color. So he was a fixture in my life. And Truman Show was the first thing he did that wasn't out of your mind, balls to the walls, nuts, like Cable Guy and all those other movies that came before. This is something where, okay, he is branching out. And I was 18 at the time. So, I mean, I didn't watch it in theaters. I caught it when it was on I think I watched it on TV, like HBO or Showtime for the first time. And I thought it was okay. I'm old enough to understand everything that's going on. But it didn't, like you said, it didn't convince me that he deserved any sort of award for it. It was just Jim Carrey stretching his acting chops and sort of sticking the landing, and I was okay with it, but I still preferred Ace Ventura: Pet Detective at that time. I still wanted that kind of Jim Carrey insanity because was what he was really good at in the end, in my opinion. That's what he was always good at, doing really strong, zany comedy.
And that's a matter of perspective as well, because I'm very much the opposite when it comes to Jim Carrey. I find him incredibly annoying in most of those zany performances, and my two favorite Jim Carrey movies are this one and the Spotless Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Like, I like him when he's dramatic. I love that movie. I love psychological stuff. I love questioning reality stuff, and that was just in line. And his balance of levity and drama, I find very compelling when he's in these types of roles. Same with Will Ferrell. I hate Will Ferrell's comedies, but I love him in a serious role. Like, It's just a weird thing for me that when comedians are being dramatic, I love them far more than when they're being comedian. Most of the time.
I think that, again, I think you said it. It's perception. It's perception. I grew up. I was there when Jim Carrey became Jim Carrey, when he appeared on the scene on In Living Color. So my first exposure to him is running with the Wayans boys, putting all his funny out there, because when he was on Living Color, that was serious comedic competition. You're going up against Damon Wayans in his prime, and you had to, if you weren't as funny as the Wayans brothers, and back then it was just Damon and it was Keenan, but then you had Tommy Davidson and all the other ones there. You had David Allen Greer when he was young and funny. All these great young comedic minds in this one literal melting pot of outstanding sort of edgelord sketch comedy, because Living Color was really the first one to push the boundaries. Saturday Night Live played it safe since the 70s, but when Living Color came along, we're gonna push it a little bit. But when he came out there, that was my first exposure. So that is the Jim Carrey I knew first. And then you get into the early 90s, and he has left In Living Color because he was there to the very end. He stayed until the lights went out. And I watched some of his stand-up back in the day. It was really funny. Showtime. There was a channel called Showtime once upon a time, and it used to air actual comedy specials. Well, they all did. HBO, Showtime, Movie Channel, Cinemax. They all aired these big comedic stars' hour-long comedy specials. They would have taped and put up. It wasn't like they do now, where Dave Chappelle records it, puts it on Netflix like that. Back then, it was on the premium channels. Yeah, I saw his stand-up. It was hilarious back in the day.
Oh, he's definitely a funny guy.
Yeah, but then he did his first... Well, he was in other movies. Like, he was in Earth Girls Are Easy and a couple of other small stuff here and there. But then he got his first starring moment, Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. And it was the Jim Carrey I knew. And I immediately latched onto it. Now, the second movie was crap. First movie was brilliant. Second, Ace Ventura 2, utter piece of shit. But that is Jim Carrey knew. And then he would still do some other comedies here and there. I'm not a biggest fan of Cable Guy, not really, because that's more of psychological creep horror, and I don't like it. It's got some good moments, but I'm not really a fan of the movie. You actually might like it if you like the Jim Carrey psychological stuff. You probably would like it. I'm not the biggest fan. A lot of people swear by it. I don't really enjoy it. But
I have a more extreme version of this where I like, the comedians in dramatic roles are my favorite, because a more extreme version of this that chat is 100% going to turn on me for is my favorite Robin Williams performance is Good Will Hunting. Bar none. Like, we've
had that discussion.
I know, but it's the same thing here with Will Ferrell, with Jim Carrey, with Robin Williams, with some of the others as well.
Well, I think the biggest difference with that is that Jim Carrey is a good comedic actor. He's a great comedian on stage, and he could be a good dramatic actor we've seen. But here's Jim Carrey. Here's Robin Williams.
Oh, I agree with that.
I mean, Robin Williams was as we said when we did the Will Hunting episode, he was a rare genius that could literally cross that line from comedy to drama in that half a second. He didn't need to switch movies. He didn't need to do a movie that was comedy drama. He could jump that in a heartbeat. And Jim Carrey, to me, doesn't have that. It's either go full drama for me and Jim Carrey, or go full comedy, I would say. I mean, if he does, but like I was saying, I prefer him in the comedy because that was my. Yeah. I had what? Let's see, I guess I would say a good 15 years of Jim Carrey comedian before he went the comedy route. And your exposure to him, he's already done it all at this point. So when you're first sitting down to look at Jim Carrey, you have all this, you have the full library of Jim Carrey to choose from. And wherever your starting point is likely to be what you end up, I think, like. But then again, like you said, you have a penchant for liking comedians to be serious.
Yep.
But I will agree, Will Ferrell is better as serious because he was god awful on Saturday Night Live. All he did is shout at people on Saturday Night SNL.
He just shouts. His shouting.
Although
is
Anchorman is something special.
I haven't seen either of those.
Anchorman 1, I never saw 2. Anchorman 1 is, I think, the lone Will Ferrell comedy that I can say I like.
Yeah.
I hate Elf. I hate that with a passion.
Oh, really? That's the comedy that I like. Well, and since we talked about it briefly with the socially awkward nature of Jim Carrey's performance being built up in universe and by his performance, I think that justifies a lot of the other acting in the movie that you don't like as well, because his best friend, he's been on the show since he was 7 years old.
Yeah.
He was nearly raised on the show as much as Jim Carrey, and because he's always talking to Truman, he's a lot of his social interactions are on the show as well. So he's not nearly as stunted socially as Truman, but he has a lot of those stunted issues as well, along the same line. So it makes sense why he's also seems a little wooden and not real and hard to interact with. And Meryl, same deal. Like a lot of these actors, especially the ones who grew up with Truman, I see them having similar issues.
You make a perfect point. He doesn't know what to really say, because when he's giving Truman the speech that will lead to him reuniting with his father, it's Christoph. It's Christoph speaking, not really him. So he wouldn't even have those words. He needs somebody to tell him deep and heavy emotional impact type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And
I've seen all these actors in other stuff. They're great in other stuff. His wife, his best friend. So I feel like it's all intentional, and it works really well for me. I get totally why the soap opera nature doesn't work for you, and it comes off as trying to be humorous, but isn't at the same time. But it's the meta aspect of it that makes it great for me, is because it's intentionally being bad, and if it's intentionally bad, then there's value to be seen in that, in my opinion.
I agree with you on that. I still feel that if they had taken some time to get away from that meta aspect, it would have made his breaks from these characters a little more impactful.
Yeah, if there was a more normal relationship.
If there, it would have made it, because when Meryl is freaking out while he's driving in the driving sequence, that's the realest Meryl we get, and in that moment, it's a great interaction. But before that, it's also fake. And you feel, and I wonder then, how does he have a connection to these people if they're so flat and two-dimensional?
Well, that comes from his social awkward as well. He doesn't know anything different. He doesn't. Besides Sylvia, he doesn't know what something real should be.
You got me there.
He has nothing to compare it to besides his one night with Sylvia. Nothing else that he can say, this is real, this is fake. He's just constant fake, so he wouldn't know the difference.
Yeah. Overall, as we go on the way here, let's talk about the flow of the movie. It's an interesting flow. The first half of the movie, we are inside the show the whole time.
For the most part.
We're around Truman. It's his events. We never leave him for the first half of the show. And it's not until...
With the exception of... There's still some exceptions, like the people watching in the diner, the audience members, and
we're not there yet, though. We're almost there. I'm talking about... Oh, I guess you're right.
We get that at the very beginning.
But that's the opening thing, though.
It's still 90% Truman in the first half.
What I mean is we're inside the show, and we get snippets of people watching it, but we don't leave the show. We're still there because people are watching it, or we have the flashback and all that stuff. It's not until the reunification with his father that we pull out.
Oh, like stop using the show's cameras.
Yeah. Suddenly or at least the show perspective. And since suddenly now we're behind the scenes. We're with Christoph. We're with his crew. We're getting more with the audience, and we're seeing the audience talking more. And I found that an interesting layout to do. And I wonder if, and one of the things that pulls back for me that takes away from me is, with all the mistakes that were happening, that, like you said, the coincidental mistakes that seemed too many, which I agree on that. Christoph should have been more pissed off when we got to him for the first time, because let's see, we had a light fixture fall, the radios happened, people who I think are out of place, there's interactions, they're not keeping track of him at certain points. He's the father gets in, the actor who plays the father breaks in and gets that far into the set where he's in front of
Truman. And he looks homeless, like he's not even in disguise.
Yeah. So I would feel like maybe there's a scene on the cutting room floor in a director's cut somewhere where Christoph is having a meltdown about all these things happening.
Well,
I think that is something that was missing that would have added another layer of the, like you said, that could have gone down the road of the show starting to fall apart after 30 years. And Christoph maybe is trying to hold it together, but we never get that. And a scene like that with all these mistakes happen, because these are catastrophic mistakes.
Oh,
because
absolutely.
Because these are all the things that we see that Truman has been pushing himself to try and get out of. He wants to go to Fiji because that's where Sylvia is supposed to be. He is constantly trying to recreate her face with the portrait of the tear out of pieces from magazines. And he's constantly asking questions about the outside, about wanting to go beyond what he is, dreams of this and that. And these events push him over. Because Christoph should have been more enraged by this. It should have been something about that. That's something to me that's missing from this, to give him even more depth of the character.
I 100% agree. That's why I pitched the whole idea, like you said, about the budget of the show getting cut because of cut viewership. I think just that storyline with just a couple scenes throughout the movie would have explained the rampant amount of coincidences that became the inciting incidences and would have helped develop Christoph to a much, much further degree. That's an essential aspect of the movie, and that's why I'm going to rate this a lot lower than people think, because if your inciting incident is broken and your quote-unquote villain has a lot of gaps in his character, that's substantial damage. So as much as I love this movie, it's got substantial issues.
Yeah. So I also want to touch on as we wind down here. This movie does do something you and I both love. There's a ton of show don't tell in this movie. I mean, they have the tell aspects, but there is the show. And one of the best shows, in my opinion, is when Truman has his first breakdown and does the traffic stop and is doing the out of control, the unpredictable movements. It with the lighthearted music that's playing around it, it feels like it shouldn't work, but it does, as he's coming into it and is realizing this world is revolving around me, and I have control. No matter what I do, I'm somehow in control of everybody's movements. But he never comes out and says it in that moment. He just does all these actions, and you see the world bending around him. And I found that very good. And the storm sequence when he's on the sea, that's a great thing. I love that too. So.
Yeah, no, they definitely show don't tell. There's a lot of interesting pieces of writing that show a degree of talent. Like, I do think, in general, besides those massive issues, it's a well-written movie that trusts its audience. And I think that's an important thing, is, it trusts you to figure that out. It trusts you to figure out his state of mind early in the movie, because we don't get to see what inside Truman's head until probably about 30-40 minutes in the movie at most, but you can infer from the way that he looks at the world there's something missing in him, and he never outright says it. We don't get it until the flashback to know what's wrong, but there's subtlety in the show don't tell, like you're talking about, subtlety in the performance from Jim Carrey, that it's just some value.
And that's where it is. Only Jim Carrey could have pulled off something like that too. That kind of show don't tell, where you need the giant gesticulation, you need the over the top body movements, that somebody who is not afraid to do that kind of acting. And that's why Jim Carrey was the perfect person for this role.
Absolutely.
Because he makes the character. He gives you that feeling of the childlike innocence of Truman, yet with the adult struggling with the realization that there's something wrong in my world, and I am not going to be constrained by it anymore because I've reached my limit. I've had enough. I realize that everybody around me is lying to me, and I need to get out of it. All right, we always like to touch on soundtrack. How much of a soundtrack?
There's not. I didn't even really comprehend the quirky music you were talking about during that sequence. Like, there's nothing to talk about. I would love a great orchestral soundtrack. It would have made sense. Some choral stuff. I think we needed a little bit extra, especially during the storm sequence. Ooh, can you imagine just a raucous?
It's just a dun 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 dun. That's all it is. It's nothing. You know what? This makes your meta argument complete, I think. It's hokey and empty on purpose.
It's soap opera music. That does make sense. Because yeah, we're constantly seeing the movie through the show's lens, and so we get a lot of the show's edits, we get a lot of the show's music, we get a lot of the show's cameras. So I guess that 100% works with the meta argument.
When they play the hokey music when he reunites with his father, that plays into your meta argument. Then, so the soundtrack is soulless and empty on purpose. It's meaningless,
just like
on
a lot
purpose.
of the performances. There's so much intentional stuff in it that could hurt people's enjoyment of the movie. Like, it's a very risky thing, these intentionally bad things. And so, like, I don't blame anyone for not liking this movie, because intentionally bad stuff doesn't work for everybody, especially in such so intentionally bad. I love the meta aspect of it, and that excuses it for me, and it's intentional, so very, very well works for me. But if someone said, I mean, a bad performance is still a bad performance, I'm like, all right, I get it. I won't blame anyone for disliking this movie.
But the movie manages to have its staying power because Jim Carrey delivers a good performance, as does Ed Harris. The two most important pieces are there, and they work. So
Absolutely.
All right, so let's score it.
Before that, there's one major other issue that I have with this movie that is just more something that wasn't in it than necessarily a flaw in and of itself. Throughout the movie, we see the shadow that his father's absence has left in Truman's life, from the aquaphobia stuff, from his relationship with his mother, the guilt he carries. There's a big shadow here. But as soon as his father shows up and then gets reintegrated into the show, we only have really one scene, and that's when, at the end, when he's trying to convince
his dad.
Exactly. It's so empty and soulless. Like, I want to see a confrontation between Truman and his father when he realizes, this man isn't my father. Why have I fought myself for decades? Why have I shaped so much of my life based off this relationship when it was so fake? Like, I wanted to see where the father's like trying to be a paternal figure once again after not being one for a while, trying to get back into his old role, trying to be comforting, trying to be a supportive father, and then Truman gradually coming to realization and making a firm contrast between the shadow that was at the beginning of the movie and seeing that shadow dissipate. Because it's just like, I guess he doesn't give a shit about his dad anymore. We needed to see that transition, and we didn't see it.
Here's the thing. Those final moments that you talk about, where that transition, there was a time skip during that period because Meryl leaves him, and he was alone for a while.
And that gave him time to dig that hole in the basement.
To dig a whole basement and to do all kinds. So a good, I would say easily a week, 2, maybe 3 weeks probably passed in that moment from the when his father comes big into it. So that's a good point. You could have had
it's inferred, but I need to see it.
Something could have been in there to add it, and that might have done enough to drive home a more serious performance from Jim Carrey then, to give us that another serious moment that was, okay, he's really trying to do a good dramatic performance here, not just the mix. So that's a good point, and I agree. I agree completely. All right, so I will score first.
Okay.
I give this a solid 7 out of 10. All the parts that you take away from it that, we just talked about the part where there could have been more dramatic scene there. Where I feel the meta could have gone a little more in one direction than the other. Jim Carrey walking that fine line doesn't always hit for me, like I said. It all boils down to 7, but it's something that I will watch this movie, but I'm not going to own it. I'm not going to put it on my shelf, but I don't hate it. I don't feel like I wasted my time because I like the whole Sylvia stuff. I like it that there is a true love line in here somewhere that could be played out. I like the show don't tell stuff in it, and I enjoy I enjoy the, even though you guys know I don't like ambiguity, I like that thing. He walked out the door and that's it. He walked out the door. We know Sylvia's going to rush to him because she knows exactly where the dome is. And you know that nobody can actually stop him from leaving because then that is more criminal aspects of this and that. And Ed Harris said, Christoph says, you can leave whenever you want. We're not going to stop you. It's on live television. So there is stuff, but still, it's a 7 out of 10 because the problems. But I'm never really gonna. I would never have chosen to watch this again unless you had chosen this tonight. And I feel that's what usually a 7 out of 10 for me is something I don't hate, but it's not something I'm going to buy, watch, or unless somebody else asks me to do it or puts it in front of me. So, all right. So what do you got?
I'm very shocked by your answer because as much as I say I love this movie, I felt like I spend more time criticizing it in this stream than anything else. And we kind of touched on it, but that scene at the end is my favorite scene of the movie, the one you're talking about, where he's talking to Christoph as this god figure in his world, and then he brings back the whole joke of good afternoon, good evening, and good night. I always get a shit-eating grin at that point.
Yeah.
But I always, like, I'm defending this movie to a very, very far degree, but I score it lower than you do. I have it as a flat 6.
Okay. All right.
And yeah, I do love this movie, but all the flaws that I mentioned, I feel are so gargantuan that it breaks the narrative consistency of the film. Like, a villain that has a whole lot of holes. The inciting incident needs to be the one thing you get the best in the movie. Either everything in the plot ceases to have any sort of cohesion. So a bad inciting incident scores very, very low for me. And then a lot of the other stuff I mentioned. So yeah, 6, as much as I love it, I have to give it a 6. I'd watch this movie on repeat. Like, I will watch it over and over again. Once a week for the rest of my life, I would be happy because I feel for Jim Carrey. I feel for a lot of these characters. I love the questioning of reality. I love stories like this. And the story of Christoph as this egotistic artist, and the questions that are asked about, like, is he proven right? Is Truman literally proving his experiment a success by leaving, by how everyone's reacting to it? And there's just a whole lot of interesting things there that I love. And another theory that we didn't mention, but the aspect with Sylvia and Truman, we know Truman's feelings for Sylvia are 100% real and romantically oriented, but with how Christoph mentions in this phone call with Sylvia, this is about politics for you. Could it just be, you know, how veganism, they go out and they market and they protest, but sometimes they don't actually care and get invested? Like, does she care about him from a human rights standpoint, or does she care about him in a romantic sense as well? So there's a whole argument of what their relationship actually is from her side. So I love having conversations like that, but there's a lot of flaws in it. There's a lot of flaws, which another draft would have helped a lot, especially adding that Christoph storyline with the budget cuts and the dropping viewership.
That's a great thing. You've given this way more thought than I have because you watched this movie way more than I have. Again, I admit it's been over a decade since I'd seen it because I don't own it. I would only watch it if it was on television. And I cut my cord like 6-7 years ago. So unless something would come on TV that I normally wouldn't watch, it's not going to be in front of me. And I would never have an urge to watch Truman Show, especially in this current climate where I'm not a big fan of Jim Carrey anymore. So I'm not looking to go back and watch old Jim Carrey movies. Therefore, I believe, and I hear everything you say, and I find it hard to disagree with what you're saying. So you have a much more nuanced perspective than I do on this, definitely, because it is so far away. So far moved. Like I said, it's the same movie that I remember, but some of the questions you posed, I never thought of because it's not something I've seen on repeat and really have these things jump out at me. And I mean, it's not like, let's say, you know what I've decided. It's not like next week's movie, which you have apparently not seen, but I have many upon many times. Demolition Man. We're going to watch the 2020 simulator next week, Demolition Man. Jed has not seen it, and I think you are in for a wild ride. Sylvester Stallone, Wesley Snipes in his best villain performance of all time. I think you're going to love Simon Phoenix. I think you are going to love Simon Phoenix. Oh! Yes, we are doing Demolition Man next week. The seashells, everything about it, the Taco Bell. We're going to Taco Bell. We're going to Taco Bell, Jed. We're going to Taco Bell next week. You'll get it when you get there. All right, guys. So again, thanks, Jed, for being here today. Thank you, chat. We hope you enjoyed it. We always appreciate your time spending with us here. If you're watching this on the replay, or when I re-upload it, it'll stream right up for the rest of the night. Tomorrow morning, get re-uploaded. Hit that like button. Leave a comment. Thank you once again. We will catch you guys on the flip side. Until then, take it easy. Have a good night or day wherever you may be. Take it easy, everybody.
Chevron 1, coded.
For my ally is the Force, and the powerful ally it is. Life creates it, makes it grow.
You failed your hunt. I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
Cry hammer, and let's set the tongues of war.
Chevron 2 is coded.
Conan, what is best in life? Crush your enemies, see them driven before you, to hear the lamentation of your women.
It's on reflexes.
I'll also say that you're heavy into martial arts, Tai Chi and all that, killer stuff. I suppose we have to register you as a lethal weapon.
Chevron 3 encoded.
And somebody ought to belt you in the mouth. But I won't. I won't. The hell I will.
Chevron 4 encoded.
Do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
Chevron 5 encoded.
You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Chevron 6 encoded.
Not for while you can, little boy.
Great Scott.
Back off, man. I'm a scientist.
I thought I'd die fighting side by side with an ally.
What about side by side with a friend?
A day may come when the courage of men fails, when we forsake our friends and break all bonds of fellowship. But it is not this day.
Chevron 7 is locked.
All right, good, nailed it. All right, that was good.
Just about an hour. Yeah, that was perfect.
Yeah, that was good. And we are going to Demolition Man. Mustang's probably going to want